We love Canvas apps because we can make them look exactly the way we want, but with great power comes great responsibility. When it comes to the forms in our Canvas apps, do we really care about what kind of data ends up going through those forms? Well, of course we do. Now, with model-driven apps, we have great tools like business rules and even just the way we define our Dataverse tables that will help with data validation. But with Canvas apps, for the most part, we don't get those kinds of helpful tools. We have to create it ourselves. And so we're going to take a quick look at an app that I created. We'll use this as a model for one way that we can do data validation within Canvas apps. There's lots of ways to do it. This is just one way. So let's jump into the app now. This is a vehicle scheduling app that facilitates fleet management. And if we go into an edit form, we can see how there are checkboxes by all of these fields indicating that they all contain valid data. Now, when the form is launched as a new reservation for the very first time, the data validation check marks don't show up until you enter some kind of a data, move on to the next field, and then it's validated. If you attempt to submit the form without elements that need to be valid being valid, then you get these red boxes and red borders around the form field with some kind of an error message telling you what needs to happen. And of course, when you click submit, the form doesn't actually submit. So how do we achieve this kind of functionality? Well, we're going to build it out together here in a simple way and walk through it. So let's go in here and we are going to create a new screen in our app, and you can of course do this in your own blank app, and we're going to create a few items here. We are going to start with our text input, and let's move this out a little bit, get a little more space on it, and we're going to call this text email. Okay, and next we are going to create our icon, and we're going to use the checkbox for our validated icon, and let's get that just the same size as our input. I like it nice and square, so we'll go 51 there as well. All right, and then let's give this a white foreground, and for right now we'll give it this green background so we can see the checkbox. We're going to come back and adjust that here in a little bit, and we're going to call this one ICO valid email. And then we will create our error message, which will be a text label. We'll drop it right under here, make it the length of our text box. Let's drop the font size down to 11, but we're going to make it bold, and we'll make it red as well. And we're going to say, please enter a valid email address. And then of course, once we have gotten all of our input fields complete, we will need a button to submit this. And of course, we're not going to worry about styling in this tutorial. You can style it however you want. I'm going to have other tutorials posting soon on design UI styling things, but this is more of a user experience tutorial on how we make this validation work well. Okay, we're going to go into our icon. Right now, it is the checkbox. But if this field is not valid, we want to turn it into an X. And so this is how this is going to work. We're going to say if, now this is where you put your test in, whatever that test is. For us, we are going to be testing for a valid email address in this field. And so we're going to use the IsMatch function. Now, IsMatch is incredibly powerful. It can match on an email address, it can match on numbers, on letters alone, or you can apply regular expressions. And so look up IsMatch in the PowerFX reference, and there's lots of things that you can match on. So what's our field that we are going to match on? We are going to, oh, you know what? I don't think we gave these, oh, we did give it a title. Oh, we didn't title this one. This is going to be LBL email. We're going to call this label error email, and then this will be our button submit. Always like to give our stuff good names. Oh, that one's being used somewhere else, so we'll call this but submit to. All right, now back to our icon. So if we can match the email fields text property with a match.email, then we are going to make a checkbox icon. So icon.check. If it does not match that, then we want it to be icon.cancel. Whoops. Okay, and there we go. So if we come in here and we enter an email address, we have a nice checkbox. If we enter something that's not an email address, it turns into the cancel icon. Now then, let's mess with this color and get this a red background if we're dealing with cancel. So we can go in here to fill, and rather than it being this green color, let's do if self.icon equals icon.check, meaning it's a good validated entry, then we're going to say color.green. And if not, it's going to be color.red. And so then this is going to give us our red X if it's bad, and if it's good, we have our green check. Now, everything else in terms of whether or not we are able to submit this form, whether this little piece shows up, is all going to be based upon the status of this checkbox that's associated with this form field. So we're not going to continue to go back and, you know, the visibility of this is not going to be based on, again, calculating whether or not this is accurate or not. We're going to do our calculations when we define the icon, and then everything else is going to point to that. So on this little guy, we are going to say it's visible based on whether or not the checkbox is visible and whether or not it's a check or whether it's a check or a cancel. So we will say if icon valid email, which is the name of our little icon there, dot visible, and if ico valid email dot icon equals icon.cancel. Okay, so it needs to be visible and it needs to be an error. If that is the case, then we want our visibility to be true. If not, then it will be false. Oh, sorry, actually, we want to do that the other way. Visible. If it's visible and it's a cancel, then then we want it to be true, otherwise false. Right, so there we go. And then we'll just put in some bad information there, and boom, please enter a valid email address. Okay, so we are making progress here. So the first thing is, or the next thing that we need to work out is that if we have it designed just like this, when the new form pulls up, it's already going to, it's going to be empty, and it's already going to be showing us a red X and please enter a valid email. That frustrates me so much when I see forms do that. I'm like, give me a chance to at least fill out the right information. So from a user experience perspective, we do not want these validation pieces showing up until the user has already made an effort to enter some data. Now, sometimes people will not let these things show up until they've clicked submit. I personally prefer to let the user enter something, and then once they have completed their entry and left the field, then we do the validation right away. But we've got to at least get things started where these validation pieces don't show up until they've at least entered something to begin with. So we're going to go to our on visible, and we're going to create a couple of things to help us out here. The first thing is, this is a choice that I've made. When somebody launches, clicks on one of these reservations and brings up an edit screen, I go ahead and throw the validation icons up on that edit screen. For me, there's a couple reasons for that. Partly is because this is a new app built on a system with old data. And so when the data from the old system got brought in, there were a number of fields which are required in the new version of the app where that data is not present in old records. And so when somebody brings up an edit form, it's going to immediately throw up the red X's where there are fields that would need to be filled out before the user can edit their form. So in my case, I want those validation icons to show up right away when they click an edit form. I do not want them to show up at all when the form is in new mode and when the form is in view mode. So what we're going to do is we're going to set a variable that we're going to call var reservation mode, and we are going to set it to new. So for our purposes in our little test, we're going to pretend like when we start this thing, it's going to be like it's a brand new entry, and then you'll see how we're going to work with that. Now then, the next thing that we need to do is create a context variable just for our screen here. And mind you, depending on your setup, this could also be a context variable. For my particular setup, it's a global variable. Doesn't really matter. You just need a variable. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to create a variable, a context variable called show validation. So we're going to go to create this context variable, and we're going to call it which I use for local, show validation. And then what we would do here is we would create an element for each field in our form. So in our case, we just have the one element. And if the reservation mode is edit, which is the one where we want it to show right away when the screen launches. If it's an edit mode, we want it to be true, but in other cases, we want it to be false, meaning that the check mark, the X, the red, the error would not show up except when we're in edit mode. So if var reservation mode, you can see where we're using that now. Whoops, if I could spell it right. If var reservation mode equals edit, then it's going to be true. Otherwise, it's going to be false. Now, if you had, more form fields, if you had a first name, you would do exactly the same, and you would apply it to each and every one of those. And of course, you could do a loop and do this maybe in a more efficient way, but we're just going to do it this way right now for just for ease of illustration. Okay, so we have our context variable updated now where our show validation is set. Okay, now then, let's go back to our icon. Okay, so now then on this visibility property, if local show validation dot email, and so that's going to be true or false. If it's true and the reservation mode is not view. Okay, so we need show local validation to be true and the reservation mode not to be view. If that is the case, then we want this to be visible. If not, we want it to be invisible. So right now, we're launching this as if, in fact, let's go out and come back in, as if this is a brand new form. It is not visible because right now our reservation mode is new, as you can see. And so our icon is not going to show up at all. So our icon is hidden. Now, if we were to enter some kind of data, and we now want this to show up, we need to be able to make that happen. So what we will do there is we will fire an onChange action on the, we'll do some actions here on the onChange trigger. So our onChange here is simply that we are going to update that context variable. I always like to do my curly braces and parentheses right off the bat, or I will invariably forget them. We will do variable, local show validation. Okay, and we're going to update our email, and we're setting that to true. So when this value changes, we are going to take local show validation.email is going to become true, which if we've done this right, will make all of our errors suddenly show up. So we've made a change here. Okay, so that makes their validation show up. We want to do a couple other little things here. We're going to change our border color to something a little more explosive. Let's make that red. So let's go border color. And here again, what we'll do is we will basically say the same kind of things here. If the icon, our email validation icon, equals icon.cancel, and it's visible, which we will do icon valid email dot visible. Then we want our border color to be red. Otherwise, whatever that default is, we'll do self.hover color, which has already been set. I'm not sure what that is, but we'll just roll with it. Okay, so now that we've got our red, and if we make this correct, then we're back to our just normal blue color, and we've gone ahead and gotten our checkbox. So let's try this again. We're going to go out. We're going to come back in. Everything, in fact, we'll go ahead and clear this as well. Okay, so we leave the screen, we come into it, it's a brand new form, everything looks good, we enter a correct email, and it is happy when we go on. If we start afresh and we enter something incorrect and we leave the field, then we've got validation errors. Okay, so we have our validation set. Now it comes down to this matter of submitting the form, and how do we go about doing that? Well, first things first, let's pretend that we are in a screen. Let's go out and we'll come back in. In fact, let me clear this out to give an idea of this. Go out and come back. Okay, let's pretend that this is a field that the user simply did not fill out at the time when they went to submit. Well, since nothing has changed and they haven't filled it out, our validation has not run on this field. So we need to activate validation on all of the input fields, even if nobody has put anything in that field. So that's the first thing that we're going to do with our on select. We're going to turn on the validation checks for all of our fields. So we're going to update our context variable, and we are going to show, take our local variable show validation, and we are going to update the our email and make it true. Now, if you were in a if we were in a situation where there was only one input, this is all you would have to do. But most likely, we're going to have a lot of inputs. And so in order to do that, we actually have to come in here and we have to patch this. So we're going to have our local show validation, and then we'll have each of our elements that need to be validated. So we'll say email is true, and then you may have others. First name is true, last name is true. You would basically enter these for each one of the elements that you have that needs to be marked as true. Okay, so we're going to delete these for right now, but that just kind of shows you what's going on. Okay, so once we have established basically that's going to fire the validation for all of these. In fact, we can come in here and look at this in action. If we have not filled anything out here and we click on submit now, boom, it's going to say, oh, you got to enter a valid email address. Okay, so, but what keeps us from actually submitting the form? We've shown the validation, but now what exactly do we do with this? So what we need to do now is check that each of our inputs has every input that needs to be validated is checked that it has been validated. And so again, we use the check mark to do that for us. Icon valid email, dot icon equals icon dot check. And if there's something wrong with it, it's going to be icon dot cancel, and this check is not going to work. And you would do this for each and every one. So if you had another one, you know, icon valid, and I've got, you know, other icons in this form, you can see all these different validation icons. You know, I can just pick, whoops, of course I grabbed the one that's the same thing, icon dot check. And we could do that for all of them, and then once we have gotten our last one, then we do our patch statement or whatever kind of activity that we're going to be doing. So in this case, just so that, since I'm not going to enter the full patch command, let's just put the number 1 there to fool it into thinking that we're doing something, and then that way we don't have any more errors. So at its simplest, that's what we're doing. We're just simply checking for the icons, making sure that all of them have check marks, and then once that is correct, then we will go ahead and patch. But there are a few other little things that we could do to help the user. For example, in our production app here, when you get to the bottom and you click submit, I don't have any kind of a pop-up show up or any kind of message underneath, and honestly, that's probably not the best way to do this. I'll probably go in afterwards and add, you know, a little pop-up screen or something. I've created a mobile or a modal graphic, and I have a component that handles my pop-ups, which creates this lovely little pop-up with a blurred background using the HTML text control. And I can customize this pop-up to be whatever I want it to be. So back in my days of being a full-stack web developer, I would always do pop-ups like this. When there was some kind of an error, I would have it pop up and say, hey, you need to fix XYZ. And so, you know, you could do that. You could make that as complicated as you want, or it could be as simple as just putting an error message under the submit button. My problem with the way I have it right now is, let's just say that I have the correct number of passengers and we've got, you know, a couple of vehicles selected. So there's something, so there's something in these fields. I hit submit and nothing happens. Everything looks green, nothing happens. Nothing tells the user that, oh, further up the screen, we've got some problems. So some kind of a message would be a good idea. So let's do what I didn't do on this production app and put in a little simple message. And again, you could get complicated and do a popover of some sort, but let's just do this. Let's put a, whoops, not a text input, a label under here, and we could color it and style it, but for just right now, let's just say there are some errors. Please check for problems. And you could, you know, be much more eloquent about it than that. And so what we're going to do on this one is let's go ahead and create a context variable that basically, if this thing does not look good, we're going to create a variable here, and we're going to call it local submission not ready, and we'll say true. Okay, this is set if it is not ready. Now, if everything was good and we had no problem and we are good to submit, we'll set as false. So let's go ahead and, this is where our patch will be. Along with the patch, we would need to update this to false. In fact, you know, I don't like the way we do that. Let's say if submission is ready, because that's what we're after. If it's ready, true. If it's not ready, then it's going to be false. Okay, so we'll come over here to our little error, which we're going to call text error submitting, and we are going to say that its visibility is equal to the local variable submission ready. And, you know, we only want this visible if it's not ready. So we'll come in here, we'll throw a not sign in front of it, and there are some errors. Please check for problems. We'll also make that red and make it bold. Now, let's go ahead and go back and take our little submission ready context variable, and let's go ahead and get it initialized properly at the beginning of things here. So we will also say location submission ready, and that one is just going to straight away, we're going to actually say true at the outset, so that it disappears. So here we go, development screen, and then back to our screen one. Okay, so we're all set. This is like a new form, and if we try to hit submit right away, we would get our validation pop up. It would not submit, and it would tell us that there are some errors. And then when we went back and fixed everything and got that corrected and then hit submit, boom, then all of our errors go away, and we patch or do whatever we're going to do, send a celebratory bit of fireworks across the screen, whatever the choice is, and you will end up with a very nice bit of validation, and you'll get the great thrill of being able to take a form and have your users go through and submit whatever it is that they need to submit. And when they're all said and done and we change the name of that driver and everybody's happy with it, they're going to hit submit. You're going to be able to give them a nice success, and you'll be off to the races. So that's form validation. Use your forms responsibly and recognize that there is not built-in validation other than if you use the edit form control. If a form field is required, then it will at least force that. But otherwise, you're on your own for developing your own validation. Do it always. And don't assume that data that goes through your apps is going to be good quality data. So that's it for now. I will be putting out some additional tutorials soon on some of the design elements of this app, how we make use of SVG icons, the responsive nature of this particular app and how it is designed, and show a little bit of how that was done. And so stay tuned for that. Those will come in the following days.